Is the Rolex Zenith Daytona likely to become a collector's item? Regardless of the watch model, one design always sets the pulse racing more than any other. The Daytona remains the watch people long for, so it's no surprise that they are among Rolex's most popular models. Recent reports indicate that vintage watches have become increasingly popular, and the Zenith-equipped Rolex Daytona is leading the pack. Could this watch eventually take the place of the Grail for many collectors? Let's find out in today's video. We all know the Rolex Daytona's lore and why it's widely regarded as one of the most sought-after watches in any category. Its motorsports timepiece is every bit as desirable among collectors today, and likely will remain so for some time to come. Rolex Daytona watches are simple and efficient, but their most attractive feature is that they increase in value as time passes. Rolex had no in-house automatic chronograph movement until the dawn of the millennium. Since they abandoned their Valdual-based manually wound movement, Rolex relied heavily on Zenith to provide internal components for their flagship, the Daytona. Zenith Daytonas have been around for a long time, and collectors drool over them as if they were iconic. In fact, that would be true. They really are. The praise for the Zenith Daytona is so great that some collectors call it the most outstanding modern Rolex watch and speculate on its potential to be worth even more in years to come. Recent history shows that watches with a long and distinguished pedigree tend to win out over those with less than one. With this in mind, the neo-vintage Rolex Zenith is an undeniably comfortable choice. It's been around for more than 30 years. This 1988 vintage watch with the Zenith El Primero movement and Rolex's Daytona DNA is what we call a neo-vintage timepiece, an example of a watch that blurs the lines between vintage and contemporary design while keeping their mechanical workings firmly rooted in tradition. Neo-vintage watches are timepieces that were made between the 1980s and 1990s, but aren't quite old enough to be considered vintage. However, they're also not modern, sufficient to classify as contemporary pieces, which is something we don't mind at all. For today's watch enthusiasts, the Zenith Daytona is a blessing for those who grew up in the 90s and are now at their pupae stage, becoming butterflies as watch collectors. For those who admire the watch, nostalgia alone is worth the price. They not only get a shiny automatic wound movement, but also some subtle aesthetic changes made by Rolex. The most significant difference between the older version of this watch and its predecessors was its increase in size, with previous models featuring a more minor 37mm case. One significant change in the design of Zenith Daytona watches was reflected on their dials, where previous generations had either metallic silver or matte black dials. The new version sported a glossy surface instead. The watch also featured metal hour markers, luminous materials, and subdials with thin outer tracks of opposing colors. Each was ringed in a metallic border. Finally, after years of pondering how to improve upon its legendary chronograph, Rolex introduced sapphire crystals on both sides of the watch's face. The decision was so subtle that most people did not notice it. But those who were paying attention could see that this change radically transformed the Daytona line into what it is today. The previous references needed to be updated, and the fact that they had to be wound manually was tiring. If you're still here, then you must be a real fan of Rolex. In the next few minutes, you'll know about the time when Rolex was not doing well in sales, and how they bounced back, so stay tuned. In the meantime, do like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more of these content. In the 1980s, consumers valued luxury items based on their status. A watch with a 37mm case was considered too feminine or too small to be taken seriously. When you think about all that, it's no surprise Rolex didn't do well in this period. In the face of this challenging market, Rolex decided to make subtle changes in its marketing strategy that proved beneficial. Zenith's new Daytona model caused quite a stir when it was released because the limited availability of its Zenith-based caliber only added fuel to that fire. Zenith dealers sought to take advantage of the craze by piling up every piece they could, despite everyone wanting one. As a result, the product's price on the secondary market rose dramatically, almost double that of its original recommended retail price. As the Zenith Daytona ages, its significance and interest to collectors will rise. This could primarily be due to it being one of the last Rolex models, with significant changes to their dials and bezels. While the occasional watch fan may not realize how significant those changes are, enthusiasts and collectors, the true soul of this industry, surely do. Rolex made some notable variations on its Zenith Daytona line over 12 years of production. In separate references, reference 16520 in steel, reference 16523 in steel and yellow gold, reference 16528 in yellow gold, reference 16518 yellow gold on a leather strap, and last but most certainly not least, the white gold version 16519. But the brand also introduced several dual versions of those references made for Rolex, one notable feature being the bezels and dials set with diamonds or other beautiful precious stones. Yes, the Daytona is a magnificent watch to behold. Yes, it's incredibly desirable and often very hard for collectors to find. Finding a unicorn would be easier than finding the German Daytona, given that the Daytona remains in production and has done so continuously since 1967. It was and is still a watch that enthusiasts and collectors keep a keen eye on. While early models like the exotic dial version worn by Paul Newman are given preferential treatment among many enthusiasts and collectors, newer iterations of the Daytona occupy privileged positions in their hearts. But since the recent auction, things are changing, and Newman Daytona watches are quickly approaching a Grail watch status. That is especially true for those who don't mind spending hundreds of thousands on every occasion as long as it gets them what they want. Of course, as we've already stated, the Zenith Daytona isn't a watch you can easily assume is vintage. It's still in its transitional phase. In light of the recent trend in neo-vintage watches, Zenith Daytonas are increasing their popularity, and for good reason. Therefore, if you're still considering getting one for yourself, then now is probably a great time to do so. If given the opportunity, would you invest in a Rolex Daytona or spend it on something else? Let us know what you think in the comments. We're constantly posting new content and trying new things, so we'd love to see your thoughts. That's it for today, Rolex fans. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to know more on what to look out for when buying Rolex watches, check out this video.